Invitation came in the mail on a Tuesday. I almost missed it. It was sandwiched between a credit card offer and a water bill. A thick cream envelope with my parents' return address printed in that embossed serif font my mother has used on every piece of correspondence since 1998. I set it on the counter and finished making lunch for my daughter first. Zoe was going through a phase where she refused to eat anything that wasn't cut into triangles. So I stood there with a butter knife, quartering her grilled cheese, before I finally picked up the envelope and tore it open. Inside was a formal invitation to my father's retirement dinner. 40 years with the same engineering firm. Black tie. The Harrington Club downtown, a Saturday in October. And tucked behind the card, written on my mother's personal stationery in her careful, slanted handwriting, was a note. Lily, we want you to know you're welcome to attend, but please be mindful of the occasion. This is an important evening for your father and for our family's reputation. You know how these things are. Given your situation, we just want to make sure everyone is comfortable. If you think it might be too much to manage, we completely understand. Mom, I read it twice. Then I set it on the counter next to Zoe's plate and watched her eat her triangle grilled cheese while I figured out whether I was going to cry or laugh. I didn't do either. I poured myself a glass of water and thought about the word situation, my situation, as if Zoe were a natural disaster, as if being 31 and raising a 5-year-old on my own was something that happened to me, like a flood or a wildfire, something to be managed around and apologized for in polite company. Have you ever been made to feel like an embarrassment just for existing? I want to hear from you in the comments, and drop a note telling me where you're watching from. I love knowing who's part of this community. I called my mother that evening after Zoe was in bed. She answered on the second ring, her voice bright in that particular way it gets when she already knows the conversation is going to be difficult, and she's decided to be pleasant through it anyway. Lily, did you get the invitation? I told her I did. Wonderful. Your father is so excited. A pause perfectly timed. Did you see the note I included? I told her I did. I just want to make sure we're all on the same page, she said. You know your cousin Adrian is going to be there with her fiancé. His family is very prominent. His father is on the board of Meridian National Bank. These are people your father has been trying to impress for years, and we want the evening to go smoothly. I said, so you're asking me not to come? Of course not. I'm just saying that if you feel like it's too much, finding a sitter, getting dressed up, all of it, no one would blame you for sitting this one out. Adrian's engagement is going to be announced that night, and we want the focus to be on the family. Your father agrees. There it was. Not the engagement. The family. The version of the family that didn't include a single mother who'd had the poor judgment to get pregnant at 26 and keep the baby when her boyfriend of 2 years decided he wasn't ready for that chapter. I told her I understood perfectly. Then I said goodnight and hung up. I stood in my kitchen for a long time. Outside, it was one of those early fall evenings where the light goes gold and the whole neighborhood smells like dry leaves. And Zoe's drawings were pinned to the refrigerator with alphabet magnets. A purple horse, a house with a smoking chimney, a figure with yellow hair that I was pretty sure was supposed to be me. I was not in fact struggling. My mother believed I worked as a case coordinator at a mid-size insurance company. That was what I had told them 3 years ago when I took the job, and that was the last update I had given them. Because every time I tried to share something real about my life, my mother steered the conversation back to Adrian's promotion, or my father's golf handicap, or some cousin's new kitchen renovation. What I actually did was run the legal compliance division for Vantage Health Solutions, one of the largest regional healthcare networks in the state. I had built that division from a 2-person team into a department of 9 team. We managed regulatory compliance across 11 hospital systems in 4 states. I had personally negotiated a federal settlement last year that saved the organization $62 million and kept 3 of our partner facilities from losing their Medicare certification. I was 31 years old, and I made $180,000 a year plus performance bonuses that had, last year, added another $40,000 on top of that. I owned a 3-bedroom house in a good school district. I drove a sensible car because I preferred not to think about my car. Zoe's college fund had more in it than my parents' retirement account. None of this was something I led with because I had spent years trying to have normal conversations with my family, and those conversations always ended the same way, with my mother saying something kind and crushing and my father nodding along, so I stopped trying to correct the record. I let them believe what they wanted to believe. But sitting in my kitchen that night, looking at Zoe's purple horse on the refrigerator, I made a decision. I was going to that dinner. I called my colleague Priya the next morning. Priya was my deputy director, and also, in the way that people who survive difficult things together become, one of my closest friends. I told her what had happened. She was quiet for a second. Then she said, "Do you want backup?" I thought about it. I thought about Dr. Ellen Marsh, the chief medical officer of Vantage Health, who had been my mentor and my professional sponsor for 4 years. I thought about how she had called me personally 2 weeks ago to tell me that the organization's board was formally recommending me for a newly created position, Senior Vice President of Legal Strategy and Compliance, a role that would make me the youngest SVP in the company's history. I had not accepted yet. I was still thinking. I called Dr. Marsh that afternoon and told her I had a small personal situation and a somewhat unusual request. She listened. She laughed, not unkindly. And then she said, "Lily, I've been looking for an excuse to wear my good earrings. The week before the dinner, I did not go shopping. I called the personal stylist who dressed our executive team for the company's annual gala and asked her to bring options to my house. She brought 6 gowns. I chose a deep navy silk crepe, floor length, with a neckline that was understated and a silhouette that was not. I borrowed nothing and apologized for nothing. When I looked in the mirror the night of the dinner, I thought, this is just a Tuesday to you now, and I felt something settle into place. Adrian texted me that afternoon. We weren't close. She was my father's sister's daughter, 3 years older than me, perpetually engaged in the project of appearing effortlessly successful. The text read, "Hey, heard you might come tonight. Just wanted to say no pressure if it's hard to get a sitter. Totally understand. See you if we see you." She included a photo of herself in a strapless champagne gown. I replied, "See you there," and nothing else. I arrived at the Harrington Club at 7:15. The club was exactly what it always had been: dark wood paneling, brass fixtures, oil portraits of men in suits, the kind of place where the air itself seemed to suggest that some people belonged and others were guests by exception. The main dining room was open for a larger gathering that evening, a charity auction for the Children's Hospital Foundation. White tablecloths, tall floral arrangements, women in actual evening gowns, men in black tie. My family's dinner was in the River Room, a private space off the main hall. To get there, you had to walk through the foyer and past the entrance to the main dining room. Dr. Marsh was waiting in the foyer with her husband, a quiet, warmly funny cardiologist named Thomas, who immediately asked if I'd eaten because he'd spotted the cheese display and felt strongly about it. Dr. Marsh hugged me and said, "You look spectacular," in the voice she uses when she means exactly what she says. We did not go to the River Room. The Harrington Club's mitre recognized Dr. Marsh immediately. She was, I would learn later, a long-time member. We were escorted to a table in the main dining room, not a corner table, not a side table, but one of the 4 central tables positioned directly in the sight line of anyone moving through the room or entering from the foyer. I sat down. I ordered sparkling water. I took a breath, and then I waited. My father's retirement dinner was scheduled to begin at 7:30. At 7:40, the River Room doors opened and the party began moving through the foyer toward the dining room entrance. My father leading the way with his arm around my mother, looking flushed and proud, followed by a stream of aunts and uncles and colleagues and family friends. Adrienne was near the back with her fiancé, a tall man named. I would find out. Christopher, whose father I recognized from the framed portraits in Meridian National Bank's lobby. They had to walk past our table to reach the bar. I saw my father stop first. He was mid-sentence, something about parking. And then his face went through 4 distinct expressions in about 2 seconds. The first was confusion. The second was recognition. The third was a kind of slow dawning alarm. And the fourth was something I hadn't expected: embarrassment. The specifically textured embarrassment of a man who realizes he's underestimated something. My mother saw me immediately after. She reached out and put her hand on my father's arm. "Lily." Her voice was barely above a murmur. What is this?" I smiled. "Hi, Mom. Happy retirement, Dad." Doctor. Mosh stood at that moment in that effortless way she has, as if standing up were something she did at a pace designed to let everyone in the room register it. She extended her hand to my father. "I'm Ellen Marsh," she said. "I've been looking forward to meeting you. Your daughter is extraordinary." My father shook her hand automatically. The name hadn't landed yet. Then it did. "Marsh," he said. "Ellen Marsh. Are you the CMO? Of Vantage Health?" "Among other things," she said pleasantly. "Though mostly tonight I'm Lily's colleague and a very enthusiastic supporter of this cheese course." Adrian had stepped forward, pulling Christopher with her. Her expression was the specific kind of pleasant that people perform when they're not sure what's happening and want to control how they look until they figure it out. Christopher was not performing. He was staring at me with his mouth slightly open. "Sorry," he said. "You're Lily Cho?" I looked at him. "I am." He turned to Adrian, then back to me, then said, in the voice of someone processing information faster than they can speak, "My father has a framed copy of your regulatory brief on the Medicare certification issue. He made our entire legal team read it." He said it was the cleanest compliance argument he'd seen in 20 years of banking law. "He's been trying to get a meeting with your leadership team for 8 months. The silence that followed was a very particular kind of silence. It had texture. My mother's hand was still on my father's arm. My father said, "Lily works in insurance." I said, "I run the legal compliance division for Vantage Health Solutions. I'm also being recommended for SVP of Legal Strategy and Compliance, which I haven't officially announced yet, so I'd appreciate some discretion." Nobody said anything. I make $180,000 a year, and last year I negotiated a settlement that saved the organization $62 million. I kept my voice even. Not cold, just clear, the way I'd learned to be clear in boardrooms. "I own my house. Zoe's college fund has more in it than most people's retirement accounts. I didn't tell you any of this because you never asked. You were too busy fitting me into a story that was easier for you to tell." My mother's eyes were bright. "Lily, why didn't you ever say?" "Because every time I tried to tell you something real, you changed the subject to Adrian's apartment or Dad's retirement timeline." I wasn't angry. I had expected to be angry and I wasn't. I was just clear. "You sent me a note with my invitation telling me to be mindful of my situation. You called me and suggested I stay home because I might make Adrian's fiancé's family uncomfortable. You decided who I was a long time ago, and you've been decorating around that decision ever since." My father sat down on the edge of an empty chair near the entrance, not because there wasn't seating, because his legs needed a moment. Adrian said, with the bright, brittle edge her voice gets when she's frightened, "You set this up. You arranged all of this just to embarrass us." I looked at her. "I came to my father's retirement dinner. You're the one who stopped at my table." Christopher had stepped slightly back from Adrian, not dramatically, just a few inches, the way a person moves when they're reconsidering their spatial relationship to a situation. He said, to no one in particular, "I'm going to call my father in the morning." My father was looking at me with an expression I didn't have a name for. He looked old in a way he hadn't before. Not unhealthy, just old. His expensive tuxedo looked like something he'd borrowed. "You saved their Medicare certification," he said finally. Like he was reading a sentence out loud and didn't know yet what it meant. "I did. And you never told us. You never asked what I did, Dad. You asked if I was managing. You asked if I was keeping up with Zoe's preschool payments. You never asked what I actually did." He looked at my mother. She looked at the floor. Dr. Marsh, bless her, stepped into the quiet with the easy authority of someone who's managed thousands of difficult rooms. "Robert," she said. She had already learned my father's name from me. "This is a meaningful night for your family. I hope you'll enjoy it." She paused. "Your daughter built something that most people with twice her advantages never could. She did it while raising a child alone and without a word of complaint or credit seeking. You should be very proud." Then she sat back down and picked up her menu, and the moment was over. They filed past us toward the river room. My father last, moving slower than the rest. He stopped at the edge of our table, his hand on the back of a chair. He looked at me for a long time. He didn't say anything. He didn't have to. I had watched my father's face my whole life, and I knew what it looked like when he was rebuilding something from scratch. He turned and followed my mother into the river room. The rest of the evening was quiet in the best possible way. Dr. Marsh and Thomas were exactly the dinner company they always were. Warm, funny, occasionally arguing about medical policy in a way that was more affectionate than contentious. I ate my dinner. I texted the sitter to check on Zoe. The sitter sent back a photo of Zoe asleep on the couch with her stuffed rabbit on her face. I laughed out loud for the first time all week. At some point, I was aware that the river room was quieter than it should have been for a retirement party. I didn't go find out why. Christopher found me on his way out. Adrian was not with him. He said, "I want to apologize for the way my family connection was used tonight." By Adrian's family, I mean that kind of using someone as a social credential. It's not how my father operates, and it's not how I operate. He paused. "I meant what I said about your regulatory brief. Could I ask Priya to set up a call?" I told him to have his father's office email mine directly. He thanked me and left. In the car on the way home, I played Zoe's favorite playlist and didn't think about the river room. I thought about the SVP rule. I thought about what it would mean to take it, not for my parents, not to prove anything, but because I had built something real and I was ready for the next floor of it. I thought about Zoe's purple horse on the refrigerator. I accepted the position 2 weeks later. The announcement went out to the company, then to the local business press. Priya screenshotted the Business Journal article and texted it to me with 17 exclamation points. My father called that same morning. I let it go to voicemail. He said, "Lily, I saw the article. I wanted to say, I'm sorry it took me this long to see it. I don't have a good reason for that. I just wanted you to know that I'm proud of you. I've always been proud of you. I just didn't know how to say it when you weren't doing what I thought you were supposed to be doing." A pause. His voice got quieter. "I'm still learning what that means." I listened to it twice. I didn't call back that day. Or that week. Not because I was punishing him. I had no interest in punishment. But because I had spent so long waiting for that voicemail, and now that it existed, I needed a moment to figure out what I actually wanted from the other side of it. That was a new question. For most of my adult life, I had known exactly what I wanted from my family to be seen. Now that they were finally looking, I had to figure out what I wanted them to see. I kept the voicemail. I saved it to my phone under my father's name. Adrian did not text, did not call, did not send a card. I noticed this for about 48 hours and then stopped noticing it. She and Christopher broke off their engagement 7 weeks later, which I learned from my cousin and filed away without comment. My mother started texting me recipes. Not apologizing, exactly, just sending recipes, the way she used to when I was in college. Pasta dishes, mostly. Once a really good lemon cake recipe that I actually made with Zoe on a Saturday afternoon, flour everywhere, Zoe eating chocolate chips directly from the bag, both of us laughing. I didn't know yet what my family was going to become. I knew that some things don't get rebuilt. They just become something different. Something smaller and more honest and built on what's actually there instead of what everyone pretended. Maybe that was enough. Maybe it turned out to be more than enough. What I did know was this. I had spent years being quiet because I believed that my silence was protecting something. I thought if I stayed invisible enough, careful enough, then I was somehow preserving the possibility of belonging. What I didn't understand until I walked into the Harrington Club in a navy silk gown and sat down at the center table was that belonging was never going to be given to me. I had to build it myself. I had been building it for years. I just hadn't been letting myself live in what I'd built. Zoe knew, in the way that 5-year-olds know things they don't have words for, that something had shifted. On the Sunday after the dinner, she climbed into my lap while I was reading and said, "Mama, are you happy?" I put down my book. I looked at her. Her dark eyes, her perpetual marker stain on her left hand, her absolute confidence that she was allowed to ask me that question. "Yeah, baby," I said. "I really am." She nodded, like this confirmed something she'd suspected, and went back to her coloring book. I picked my book back up. Outside, the October light was coming through the windows at that late afternoon angle that makes everything look like a painting, and the house was warm, and my daughter was drawing something purple on a piece of construction paper. And I realized, exactly where I was supposed to be. I had never needed them to crown me. I needed them to stop standing in the doorway, and finally, quietly, without ceremony, they had stepped aside. The best version of this story isn't the moment in the dining room. It isn't the look on my father's face, or Christopher stepping away from Adrian, or the Business Journal headline. The best version is the Sunday afternoon 2 weeks later, when Zoe and I made that lemon cake and she got powdered sugar on her nose, and I didn't think once about the Harrington Club or the River Room or the note on my mother's stationery. I just thought, this is my life. And I was glad. If any part of this story found you, if you've ever been the one who had to build quietly while someone else decided who you were, I want to hear from you. Leave a comment. Tell me what you built. Tell me where you're watching from. You already belong here. I've thought about that note a lot since then, not with anger. That part faded faster than I expected. What I keep coming back to is how small a piece of paper it was. A few sentences on monogram stationery, tucked behind a formal invitation, and somehow it was supposed to contain everything my mother believed about who I was and what I deserved. What I've come to understand is that the note wasn't really about the dinner. It was the accumulation of 1,000 small decisions my family had made over 7 years, every assumption left unchallenged, every conversation that didn't ask the follow-up question. Every time I nodded and let them believe the smaller version of me because it seemed easier than fighting for the real one. I participated in that silence. I told myself it was patience or strategy or just keeping the peace. But some of it was fear. The fear that if I showed them the actual shape of my life, they still wouldn't see it the way I needed them to. Here's what I know now. Silence has a cost. Not to the people around you. To you. When you spend years making yourself smaller to fit someone else's idea of who you are, you don't just hide from them. You start to lose track of yourself. Not completely, not permanently, but there are mornings where you stand in your own kitchen, in the house you own outright, making breakfast for the daughter you've raised mostly alone. And some small, tired part of you still wonders if you're enough. That part doesn't go away because you got a promotion or saved an organization's $62 million. It goes away when you stop asking other people's opinions of your life to matter more than your own. What Lily did, what I did, wasn't revenge. I want to be clear about that. Because I think it's easy to read a story like this and see a takedown, a gotcha, a moment of public triumph. But that's not what it felt like from the inside. What it felt like was just finally choosing not to disappear. Doctor, Marsh didn't come to that dinner to humiliate my family. She came because I asked her to, and because she believed I had spent too long standing outside a door I had every right to walk through. Walking through it wasn't an act of aggression. It was just the end of a very long habit of making myself invisible. The cause was years of quiet, steady work. Mornings before Zoe woke up, late nights after she went to bed, every hard decision made with her in mind. The effect wasn't the Business Journal headline or the SVP title. The effect was that Sunday afternoon in the kitchen, flour on the counter, Zoe with powdered sugar on her nose, both of us laughing at nothing in particular. And that's what all of it was for. Not the moment at the Harrington Club. That moment was just the door closing on something I was already done with. If there's anything I want to leave you with, It's this. The people who dismiss you are not seeing the future. They're only ever seeing the past. The version of you that existed before you did the work, or the version they needed you to be so that their own story made sense. Their opinion is not a verdict. It is just a data point from someone who stopped paying attention. You don't have to correct them loudly, you just have to keep building. And eventually, you walk into a room and the room tells the truth for you. Zoe asked me once if I was happy. She was 5. She climbed into my lap and asked the question like it was the most reasonable thing in the world to ask. I told her yes, and I meant it completely. That's the whole story. That's the part that matters.